Welcome back to another episode of Archie's Sonic Character Files as we explore the histories of the inhabitants on planet Mobius. In this episode, we take a look at the histories of the various robots based on the Blue Speedster, in this case, the other Sonic robots. Before I eventually get around to covering Metal Sonic on this series, I still have a few other miscellaneous robot Sonics to cover, some of them based on their game counterparts, and others being exclusive to the comics. Things are going to be a bit random with some of these selections. Some of them I have a lot to say about, and others are very short. So, let's begin the list. Pseudo-Sonic made his first appearance in issue 9. Robotnik has created a robot that looks like Sonic and has the same abilities as him, and sends the robot off to find the entrance to Knothole. He manages to find the entrance, and begins to send the coordinates to Robotnik. But the transmission is cut short when Tails defeats him with the power of static electricity, which causes the robot to overload and explode. At the end of the story, Rotor dumps the scrap remains of Pseudo-Sonic in the trash, with the robot asking if he could have a sequel. Now you think this would be the end for this guy, being thrown onto the pile of one-shot badniks, but it turns out he just had to wait almost 12 years to get his sequel, in issue 170, from the story The Island of Misfit Badniks. In this story, Sonic discovers an island populated by some of Robotnik's retired badniks, like Motorbug, Caterkiller, and of course, Pseudo-Sonic. The two blue dudes meet for the first time and start battling each other. Since the two are equally matched, the other badniks suggest that they should handle things the old-fashioned way, by taking 50 paces back and charge at each other. Whoever survives is the winner. After a mighty skaplang, Sonic is flung off of the island as he watches it crumble into the sea by the massive vibrations. But unbeknownst to him, the Badnik Island survived, now in a glass dome, and Pseudo-Sonic is knocked out from the battle. But it didn't take long for him to be put back into action in issue 185. While being repaired, Barrowbot discovers that Pseudo-Sonic was equipped with a ratio redoubling router that causes a robot to grow in size, the same technology that had been used on a previous Barrowbot model. They soon activate it to make Pseudo-Sonic into a giant, and continue their plans on repairing the robot so that they can get revenge against Mobius. That is, until the 40 Fathom Freedom Fighters show up to attack the Badniks. All seems lost once Pseudo-Sonic is finally activated, but is quickly taken care of by the plot device Fluke the Blue Whale. And with that, Pseudo-Sonic would share the same fate as the rest of the Badniks, by being smashed up into a metallic cube. And that's pretty much the history of Pseudo-Sonic, the very first robot Sonic in the Archie Sonic universe. Yeah, it's pretty obvious that the first story that he shows up in is a very loose adaptation of the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog episode with Pseudo-Sonic. Robotnik creates a robot Sonic, the real Sonic is out of action after being exposed to poison flowers, and both the robot and Robotnik end up getting defeated at the end. The one noticeable difference is that in the episode, someone was always piloting the robot, while in Archie Sonic, the robot has a mind of its own. As for the character himself, he's okay, though the stories that he's in do kinda suck. Like seeing him be defeated by static electricity where Tails drags his two tails on the dirt ground that somehow causes it to happen. Well, then again, it was written by Matt Gallagher, so yeah, cartoon logic. His comeback where he actually gets to fight it out with Sonic was better, though their time together is a bit too short. And seeing him be defeated by one of the more forgettable Freedom Fighters is a sad way to die out on. Man, I don't know what's worse, this, or that time they brought the original Robotnik back from the dead in a pretty lousy story. So yeah, it's a bit of a shame that he wasn't a reoccurring villain in the very early days of Archie Sonic. But since Pseudo-Sonic was introduced during a time when a more sleeker and cooler robot Sonic already existed, there's no contest. Well, at least Adventures of Sonic got to have more fun with the concept, even if it was just for one episode. The first instance of a Titan Metal Sonic was first seen in the Knuckles Chaotix special, where the team go up against a rebuilt Metal Sonic made by the original Robotnik. After some fighting, the robot would use a power gem to increase its strength and size to become Titan Metal Sonic. Fortunately for Knuckles, Heavy gives him a power gem to increase his size and manages to defeat the robot. The next time we'd see this thing would be in issue 231. After a now roboticized Sally throws Sonic off of the Death Egg Mark II, the second Robotnik is informed that the Chaos Emerald powering the Death Egg has mysteriously disappeared. He angrily retreats, but not before leaving behind some robots to cause some damage on New Mobotropolis, one of them being Titan Metal Sonic. Bunny flies into action to stop the creature, while Nagus joins in as well. The wizard uses his magic to trap the robot in crystal. In a desperate move, Robotnik fires the Egg Annihilator beam from the Death Egg onto New Mobotropolis. Titan Metal Sonic, now under the control of Nagus, puts itself in the beam's path and is destroyed, saving the city in the process. But that wouldn't stop Robotnik from building another model 10 issues later. This time, the robot is controlled by the Krudzu Hybrid Hydra and is sent out to attack Team Fighters who are chasing after the Death Egg Mark II. After putting up a fight for a while, Sonic does the finishing move on the robot. And that covers Titan Metal Sonic, the giant monster. It's obviously Archie Sonic's version of Metal Sonic Kai from Knuckles Chaotix, so it makes sense that it would appear in their adaptation of the 32X game. And personally, I prefer the name Titan Metal Sonic. Just has a little more punch to it in my opinion. Even so, it was a nice surprise to see it in action a few times. So yeah, I like this guy. Wish we got to see more of him. The robot was planned to be featured in Sonic Universe issue 97, further proving that the events of Knuckles Chaotix already took place in the new timeline, but it was cancelled. A real shame we don't have any story notes on what exactly is going on these panels. My interpretation is that since the story focuses on Sally, Amy, and Cream planning to help restore Nicole's handheld form, they head over to New Tragic High Zone to find scrap parts. They discover the remains of Titan Metal Sonic, who isn't quite as dead as they thought. As for how it's still functioning, no idea. Either it still has some juice left to operate, or it's now under the control of Phage, Robotnik's virus program. The world may never know. While not existing in Archie Sonic's old timeline, it is present in the new timeline. But it's only reduced to a cameo and a flashback when Dr. Snively recalls the events of Sonic and Knuckles. The robot was going to have a more active role in issue 291, during their adaptation/advertisement for the game, but as you can imagine, it was cancelled. Out of all the official robot Sonics from the games, I'm surprised this is the one that got the short end of the stick in Archie Sonic. You'd think they would have some fun, given his cool design and all that, but alas. Then again, I suppose they thought it would confuse people over the roboticized Sonic, who is also called Mecha Sonic. Plus, the original Metal Sonic was also named that for some reason. So yeah, not much to say about this one. A cool robot that was never given the spotlight in the Archie Sonic universe. At least IDW Sonic got to have some fun in giving it a new makeover. Well, we might as well wrap up all the robots that originated from the games, as we move on to the next one. The Metal Sonic Troopers were only featured in issues 157 through 159. After everyone believed that Sonic had died at the end of the Zordar War, Rotor and Sir Charles were tasked in creating a new line of defense to protect Knothole by making 100 robots based off of their fallen hero. When the real Sonic returned after being stranded in space for a year, the project was quietly abandoned before it was activated. Later on, it would be discovered by Robotnik's son Adam, who had gone under the anonymous name, and activated the army to go after Robotnik and later attack Knothole. Sonic and the gang were able to fight off the army of robots, and they were later destroyed by Shadow, who unknowingly unleashed his Chaos Control ability. Despite this setback, Sir Charles would make better use of the Metal Sonic Troopers by using their scrap parts to rebuild the original Metal Sonic, a robot that has now turned over a new leaf and going by the name of Shard. So that's the Metal Sonic Troopers, a more unique take on Neo Metal Sonic from the games. I always did like Neo Metal for his design and all that, so it was kinda cool to see a whole army of them. In fact, this was the first time I ever saw the concept of an army of Metal Sonics in official Sonic media. Of course, I later found out that this wasn't the first time this has happened. Yeah, in a lot of ways, the Troopers is just Archie Sonic trying to do their own take on the Brotherhood of Metallics from Fleetway Sonic. Though, unlike the Metallics that acted more like the Daleks from Doctor Who, the Troopers act more like soldiers. It is kind of funny how Sir Charles claims that the robots are better and more streamlined, and yet they couldn't survive a single Chaos Control. Huh. Yes, Robotnik was right in calling them cheap knockoffs. Now, if you've seen my previous episode covering Honey and Breezy, then you'll know that the new timeline featured a more game-accurate version of Neo Metal Sonic in a flashback, with the events of Sonic Heroes being considered canon and all that. But what about his super form, Metal Overlord? Does this ever show up in Archie Sonic? Not really. All we get is just a name drop from Sonic during the Worlds Collide crossover. So I'd chalk this one up as new canon-only material, since this crossover had the characters' memories changed to being more closer to the games. Well, at least IDW Sonic got to have some fun with both Neo Metal Sonic and Metal Overlord, despite Ian Flynn's dislike for this particular super form. This Blink and You'll Miss It robot only appeared near the end of one of the stories in Sonic Super Special Issue 12, a story where Sonic ends up in an alternate universe where Robotnik is the good guy, known as Dr. J. Kintobor. Their Sonic and other characters have been turned into giant Godzilla-like monsters due to some failed experiments, and the main Sonic ends up helping the Doctor in retrieving a Chaos Emerald from the giant mutants. After the battle, Sonic travels back to his world with the help of Sonic the Zone Cop, while the good Doctor uses the Chaos Emerald to power up a new robot to help protect the city. And that's it. Yeah, there's really not a whole lot to say about this obscure robot that only gets one panel of screen time. Heck, it doesn't even have a proper name. Well, looks cool, I guess. Anyway, let's move on to the final robot. Okay, I might be cheating a bit with this one, but since Scourge is technically an evil version of Sonic from an alternate universe, I'm gonna throw this one onto the list. Metal Scourge made his first appearance at the end of issue 191, and we wouldn't be seeing it in action until the next issue. Around this time, Scourge, along with his Suppression Squad, have taken over Freedom HQ. Sonic tries to take it back on his own, and Robotnik sends out Metal Sonic and the newly created Metal Scourge to cause trouble. After some fighting, the Hedgehogs are getting nowhere with these robots, and Sonic manages to convince Scourge to call on his team to help them out. This would be the end of Metal Scourge, and much like the Metal Sonic Troopers, its scrap remains would be used to help rebuild Shard. So yeah, Metal Scourge is basically just a one-and-done character. I remember Ian Flynn said somewhere on the Bumblecast series that he really didn't have any future plans for Metal Scourge, saying that he only threw him in there just for the coolness factor. And sure, having a Metal Scourge is cool and all, but I feel like this is a wasted idea. It is kind of jarring seeing Robotnik build this thing, instead of Dr. Kintobor, the good Robotnik from Scourge's dimension. Not to mention the fact that Scourge claims that there are no Metal Sonics in his world. Personally, I would have preferred the idea that Metal Scourge was a creation by Dr. Kintobor, created to be an assistant to help him around the veterinarian clinic. He may not be the strongest robot, but it's a robot that Kintobor would consider to be like a son to him, as well as having some comedic moments, like Metal Scourge trying to help Buns Rabot, the anti-Bunny Rabot that Kintobor saved, to try and act more like a nicer person. But that's just me. I am curious to hear anyone else that has any ideas on how to make better use of Metal Scourge. And that concludes all the other Robot Sonics. Some were good, some were bad, all purely made of metal. That takes care of this character file, so until then, I got a juice! Oh wait, I completely forgot to talk about Aluminum Sonic that showed up in that one off-panel segment from issue 114. Yeah, that was a thing.